Okay, I would like to call this Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting to order. May we have roll call, please?
Yes, Elizabeth Doberman, Mary Lee Hall, Samantha Hall,
Here.
William Hall,
Here.
Jeremy Hash,
Here.
Jennifer Henkel,
Here.
Nathan Henkel,
Here.
James Holly,
Here.
and Joseph Wilson.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to 2.01, public comment. Do we have any public comment on the Buildings and Grounds this evening? No? Okay, moving on to 0.31. We have a presentation. This is going to be given by Sue and others.
Good evening, everyone. Appreciate you being here. Here with Mr. Buffington, which I think everybody knows who he is. And we know we're a little behind schedule. So we're going to go through things this evening with the plan that if there are additional questions, we could have a Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting before Finance and Budget in November on that Tuesday if we need to go through additional things and answer any additional questions. So our objectives this evening are to talk about the capital improvement projects, answer any additional questions you may have on the architectural proposals for the feasibility study, which is on the board agenda for this evening. Talk a little bit about Susquehannock High School furniture, fixtures, and equipment, get a driveway update, and then talk about next steps in the process. So I'm going to turn it over to Randy.
Thank you. I'd like to talk about some proposed projects that we're proposing in our capital improvement plan for this year. One of the things is we're working on this plan, we're working to verify budgets, cost of materials and those types of things. You will see some budget numbers there. That may tweak a little bit till November, but they should be very close. As well as we're looking at the cost of labor, as well as working and verifying schedule, which would include lead times and crew availabilities and things. A lot of times the projects that we're trying to do, trying to hit summertime, but there are some that we can do while in session. So let me walk down through those projects that we're proposing. For many, many years, we've had an ongoing maintenance replacement roof plan. So unlike your house that, per building, we have many, many roofs. They're at different levels. They have parapet, so it's tiny walls up on the roof that separate these roofs. We have a plan, and we look to extend the life of these roofs. It's very important that our buildings don't take on water. So this is an area of focus for us. What we're proposing is on the main campus, several roof sections on Southern Elementary, Southern Middle, and the high school roofs, portions of those roofs, to replace and or coat. There's a system in place, depending on the type of roof and the condition that roof is in, we may be able to coat a roof, less expensive than replacing it, and still get a good warranty out of it. So we're taking those factors into play to see what's best for us and long term of our facilities. One thing I would point out, we are holding off from Shrewsbury Elementary roof. We're going to look at the recommendations that would come out of the feasibility study, and depending on what comes out of that, maybe that roof would go along with some projects there. There are needs, though, at Shrewsbury Elementary. One of the things insurance companies are now doing, they're doing their own inspections of roofs with drones and other inspections. And our insurance company did note conditions of Southern Middle and Shrewsbury Elementary of potential concern of replacing those roofs. So we have a schedule that we've outlined that you have there, you know, and we would look to do that in the summer. But one of the other factors, or one of the other things we did apply for a grant for the portions of roof at Southern Middle School. We have not heard back from that. I believe we're, by the end of the month, we're believing, you know, we may hear something. Just the other day, last Friday, I think it was, Mr. Carrington and I were on the phone with
Representative Klunk's office.
Representative Klunk's office, had some conversation there. So we did hear there is some movement, so.
So they were originally supposed to award those grants in September. They did move it then to the October meeting, which I believe it's in the middle of next week. One of the things that we heard that's kind of positive is they're looking at awarding to partials to more districts. So there's a possibility we could at least get some of the funding from it. The other thing I wanted to add, I know Randy talked about the insurance company and having drones go over top. We also do our own roof preventative maintenance and checks on our roofs, so we have folks come in to take a look at our roofs, especially after things like the storm that we had last year and those kinds of things. So we're always kind of doing those things. I shouldn't say we. These guys are always kind of doing those things to make sure they're keeping a handle on the roofs. Because some of our roofs, we kind of joked a couple of years ago, I think the roof was from 1956 and we replaced it. So it's not about how old it is necessarily, but the condition of where it is.
Yeah. And it's something, you know, our maintenance staff are on the roofs quite a bit as well, cleaning out drains and, you know, making sure things are working properly. The next item there would be installments for the artificial turf fields. So the board may recall, we continue to set money aside. So when those fields, the top surface needs replaced, that we would have the funding in place to do that. Typically, those fields, surface will last 10 to 12 years. You know, so it's our goal to, by the time that they need replaced, the money would be there to do that. There was a big investment when we initially put those fields in. There's a big drainage system underneath that. The good thing is that drainage system does not need replaced. It's the top surface that does. The next item, a well pump at the main campus. It's approximately 20 years old. Serves this campus. It sits out here adjacent between the bus lane and the field hockey field. The purpose or the thought behind replacing the well pump is it's achieved its life, you know, and we'd rather replace it on our terms than than the terms when it fails. If it fails, we have about 3 days in order to get it done. Our storage tank out there, if we're in session, would handle enough water for approximately 3 days. That becomes a challenge. So what we'd like to do is we're proposing to do it next summer, you know, when the usage is down, but also we have it planned and you know, rather than during a failure of the pump. Operable partition work. So at the middle school auditorium, if you're familiar with that, there are 2 operable partitions, so partitions that move, much like these partitions here. At the auditorium at the middle school, they have the main section of the auditorium and 2 wings. There's operable partitions that you can close the 2 wings and use those as separate spaces. I believe those walls or those operable partitions are original to the building. That would put them 1967. Through the professional inspections that we have done, they noted that the trolleys and cables on one of those walls should be replaced. So we would recommend to have that work done. Now, because the 2 walls are very similar and they are the same age, it's probable that in the future we may need to do the second wall as well. But we would propose at this time to do the 1 wall. Finally, the building automation system controls. Very, very important system that we have in all of our buildings. It helps us to save energy. It also, more importantly, keeps good indoor air quality, humidity, temperature, carbon dioxide. It's what helps control our HVAC system. That system has, various parts to it. The controller controls different systems within that. And in particular, what we're looking to do are the most important parts are the heating loop and the chilled loop. So in the building, and in particular at Shrewsbury Elementary, Southern Elementary, and Southern Middle. We're looking to replace those controllers. We would actually harvest those, meaning because those parts are not being manufactured anymore, we would actually harvest them, put them on the shelf, and could potentially use them in emergency for other similar controllers we have in our buildings. But we're looking to shed our risk. So if the controller fails for the heating loop in particular, we may lose the heat in the entire building. And two things, potentially could need to close school. Second thing would be freeze up. So you could actually potentially have pipes that would freeze. This project replaces, parts of that. If we were to do a whole system, we're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably for one of our elementaries, probably 500,000 or so. At some point in the future, probably incorporated with a major project, we would want to do other local controllers, such as for the classrooms and things like that. We are at risk of a classroom going down. However, we can handle that by the students move to another room, and we're keeping enough heat in the building that freeze ups are probably a minimum concern at that point, versus the whole heating loop being down. I think that's, yeah. So overall, we'll be proposing, these projects to move forward with our plan. As well as tonight, you were in executive session, you were given some security projects that were listed. We're not going to go over those tonight, but you have those on the yellow sheet. There's a couple there that we may look to do as well. And we'll be talking about that at a later time.
Yeah, as we discussed in the November executive session. So I'll hand those out after the board meeting.
So just want to give a little update on capital improvement projects, the sewer project. A couple things we've been working on there. Some challenges with some easements. We have a permanent easement, so that sewer line goes down, from the campus and feeds down into the sewer plant. So there's an easement involved there, but we also need a temporary easement for construction. So we've been working with the property owners on that, as well as we're starting to work on permitting for that project, in hopes that in the summer of 2025 we'll be doing that project. One of the advantages to doing it in the summer is obviously the campus usage of the sewer is lower in the summer than it is during school. So it's our hope to do that project in the summer. But we'll be coming back to you with more updates on that. And there are a couple agenda items related to that on tonight's agenda, or the board meeting agenda.
And I do want to make a little tweak to the slide. It talks about the funding there. That would be from reserved fund balance. If you remember, we talked about in the spring, we used up the bond funds because there's time limits on bonds. We used that, it was up from the high school, and then are reverting to reserve fund balance.
Okay, we can
Got it.
flip to the next. So food service replacement equipment. So out of the capital reserve fund over the last several years, our walk-in refrigerator and freezers, we've been refurbishing the mechanical components of those. We would like to change the fund that comes out of. We'd like to do for the district storage freezer, which is actually in the basement of Sutherland Elementary. We would like to refurbish the mechanical components of that freezer. The advantage of having an extra freezer is that if one goes down, we can actually transfer food into the other. You know, so there is definitely an advantage to having, you know, an additional freezer there. Oftentimes as well, the initial food delivery, some of the deliveries come into and get placed in those freezers as well, freezers and refrigerator there. So we'd like to, you know, continue on that initiative of updating the walk-ins, but just wanted to update you on the funding of that.
Yeah, and really the reasoning for changing the fund, our food service fund, I think we've talked about this a couple times, our food service fund has always been pretty much break even or at a loss because we have a very low free and reduced lunch program. But because we've gotten a lot more federal funding in the last couple of years, we had free lunches for a while, we now have free breakfast, we have sufficient amount of money to be able to pay for it out of food service, and it really relates to that. So that's why, that's our recommendation.
So, feasibility study, I think you have that one.
Okay, so we just want to make sure if there's any questions. So the recommendation from the committee is for Beers and Hoffman. So we have, we had 2 rounds of interviews. We had proposals. The committee worked through that. So thank you to Mr. Hall, Mr. Hash, and Mr. Buffington for working on that committee. So really what this would be is for the feasibility study, but also for designs for capital improvement projects that we're talking about, making sure that we're keeping the same architects, so we're not working with multiple architects. So one of the reasons we held off on talking about some of the capital improvement projects was we wanted to see where we were with picking an architect. So afterwards, we'll develop a timeline for addressing greatest needs, and then the other thing we wanted to point out is we go through the process of the feasibility study and looking at the results of that and determining what the greatest needs are. We may need to have additional committee meetings, so as we work through that in the next couple months. And as we always point out, we're always thinking about when we're working through this, how do we get to maximizing projects during the summer? So that's really all we're really thinking about all the time is how do we make sure that we're doing these things. Couple reasons for that are critical. Impact to students, first and foremost, we want to reduce that as much as possible. But hand in hand with that is also, it is less expensive to work on buildings when there aren't students in there. So both are very important.
Actually, I'd like to talk to you about furniture, fixtures, and equipment for the high school project, often called FFE. So if you hear that, that's what that means. So the FFE budget has, you know, approximately a little over $35,000 left in it, as well as there's a technology budget within the project that there's money there as well. So one of the things purposely that was done was not spending that whole budget and waiting to see how you know things transpired throughout the project. Now that we're near the end of the project, we're coming with a prioritized list from the high school administration and with their recommendation to perhaps purchase some additional furniture. And as you can see, these are estimates. You know, we work with the vendors and suppliers, so, you know, we feel comfortable with these numbers, but you know, looking at purchasing additional lab stools, teacher desks, playground equipment. So the child care area would be a playground structure, actually would be installed outside that area in a fenced-in area. Music files to store music, as well as some office furniture for 3 offices that are using existing equipment or existing furniture at this time. But so our recommendation would be, to purchase all this equipment, but we wanted to bring it to the board because it would go over the remaining FF&E budget. But we do feel comfortable that because there's some funds within the technology FF&E part, we'd recommend purchasing those items. But our plan would be to come back with proposals in November for your consideration.
In priority order. I do want to emphasize what Randy was saying too. When we had to order the furniture, fixtures, and equipment for the project very early on in order to get it here in time for the phases. So one of the challenges that are kind of goes on behind the scenes is when we're working through what all these needs are, we had to order it so far in advance, but it had to get here in a finite amount of time so that the phase was done enough for us to get the equipment delivered, put together, but then have it put together so that when we put the kids back in their spaces, it was there. So it is a very challenging timeline thing. So we had to do it very early. We felt uncomfortable spending the entire budget, even though there were additional needs, because it was very early on and we didn't know what else was going on in the project. So we're always very concerned about making sure we stay within budget. So as we walk through these, I just want to make sure people understand these are definitely needs. They're not extra things that we're asking for. But again, building's open, we're working through it. It's okay. But we just wanted to bring back things that in priority order of what was still out there. Okay.
And if I could add, to clarify what you're saying, we're still not even getting close to consuming all of that budget on the technology side.
Right.
Still about $125,000 left over so this is not a matter of we're just spending it because it's in the budget. There's still an additional $125,000 that's not being proposed to be spent that is in that budget. So just to clarify that.
Yes, thank you.
I'd like to give you some updates on our driveways. So the new driveway, the new back driveway, as part of the project, needed to be permitted. So we had those permits from PennDOT, and as we're working through, as we got that permit, one of the conditions that they put on that permit for the back drive was to actually get the front drive permitted. The front drive was never permitted. From when it was built in the 1950s, it did not have a permit on. But we're looking to close, so as you do a project, you have the permit, then as you get to the end of the project, you look to close out the permit. Now, as part of the condition to close out the back drive permit, we have to permit the front drive. We're working through that. We're going to need some vehicular counts, some traffic assessment. As we move the construction vehicles out of here, as construction moves on and we get to using these two driveways as they're intended, we'll get some vehicular counts taken to determine whether the front drive is a low use or a medium use. Depending on what condition that is, there may be some other conditions or things that we need to do to satisfy the PennDOT requirements. But we're working through that, obviously with our engineers, with PennDOT as well, to satisfy, close out the back drive permit, but also satisfy their additional requirements that they are putting on our driveways at this time. One of the other things with the driveways that we wanted to talk about are the signage. So with the signage, we were looking at, could we use the flashing light signs, school zone? Although we don't qualify for that because it's hazardous routes, and we don't have any students that walk home for it. So we don't meet the PennDOT requirements for having that type of signage. So we're looking what else could be done. We do have an existing sign that, just a regular kind of standard traffic sign that is located across the street from the farmhouse that sits near the front drive. It's old, faded, so one of the things we're proposing to do, and we've gotten verbal commitment from PennDOT that we can replace that sign in kind, as well as, so that would be traveling west, as well as put a similar sign traveling east before you get to the front drive. Put a similar sign, just giving heads up that, there's a school. The other thing that we've, working with our engineers and PennDOT and things, is to put a sign each direction at the back drive. Because the buses are using that, working with PennDOT and their requirements of what type of sign it could be, their requirements would be, there would be a bus crossing sign. It's a particular sign that they would, verbally they've permitted or that we're working through. So we would put one of those signs in each direction in the right of way, just like any other traffic sign, is what we're looking to do with that.
So as we're working through it, on a very positive note, we're very happy that we have that verbal approval. We also have verbal approval for our contractor to put the signs in, so hopefully that'll expedite it. So we're going to keep working to get those in as soon as possible. That's really our goal, and we'll continue to look at those areas. Hopefully that will help to slow down traffic. I know I don't normally come that direction very often, but I know when I came yesterday, it's like, okay, there really is no sign. So hopefully having a sign will help slow that down and make sure people understand they have a school ahead. So we're really hoping that. We would like to have seen some kind of school sign, even if it wasn't flashing. We even proposed between the hours of 7 and 9 and 3 and 5, because I know some other local school districts, we weren't granted that at this point, but we'll keep taking a look at that.
And just to kind of update the board, this isn't new. Back in 2014, we actually had a debate, Sue won, of what year it was. I think I was a year earlier that I was saying we did this, but we approached PennDOT previously about signage and things, and the answer was no. And but the one thing they did say is you could improve your back drive.
We recommend you relocate your back drive at a 90-degree angle, which is what we have now.
We've done it.
So we've done that part. So hopefully, as we continue to work in cooperation with them, we'll continue to be able to make improvements.
All right, I think we're just at our summary.
Is that me?
Yep, or I can do it either way.
Okay, so summary and recommendations. So we have the architect for the feasibility study on board agenda for this evening, so we'll ask if there's any questions on that. We are recommending approval of funding for the capital improvement projects in November, as we talked about. Safety and security projects, again, we'll be talking about those in executive session due to the nature of them. And then we'll be asking to move forward on some of those items. Furniture, fixtures, and equipment for Susquehanna High School, that will be November. And then if we approve the proposals for this evening, then we would bring back to November, later in the agenda, after the transfer, approval for moving forward on some of those capital improvement projects so that we can hit that summer timeline. So throw it open to questions.
So, I don't know exactly how much time we have here, but I would like to discuss a little bit about our status on some of our other previously approved capital improvement projects, if you can. I know I'm a little off the cuff. We had a list before, but if we could just discuss that a little bit to talk about where we are on things that are already approved.
Yeah, thank you. Let me pull those up. Yes, so certainly would have been in board packets, but in the Buildings and Grounds report, kind of referring to those. I'll just kind of hit on some of those and certainly any additional questions from that. So the rooftop ventilation system is actually, so to boil that down, what's that for? Periodically, we will go in and test for radon. If we need to mitigate levels of that, we would use that budget to install fans and, other devices to do that. Second item there for the artificial turf, we've talked about that earlier, where, we continue to set money aside so that's there when needed, which should be, we did 2019, 2029, 30, 31, somewhere in there, is when we would look to do that. Replace.
Again, we test, I just want to kind
Sure.
of talk about that a little bit. So as Randy said, 8 to 10 years. We got more last time.
10 to 12.
10 to 12.
Yep.
We got more last time, so we will test it. They do the GMAX testing. So like the roofs, it won't just be, we hit that point where it's funded and we would do it. We would continue to test the turf and see where we are with it.
Replacing the press box, that's allocated. We want to do that one in conjunction with the communication for press box as well. Currently, that's not in, we haven't done with that. We'll look to establish a timeline for that. Most likely, it would not be this summer. It's probably would be the following summer to look at that. Next item there is the walk-in refrigerator freezers. We talked about that. We're actually closing that out within the capital reserve and going to the food service fund, as we had talked about. Replacing flagpole at Friendship. We may need to increase the budget there a little bit. We've been gathering quotes. Unfortunately, haven't gotten a quote yet within that budget. I guess the cost of flagpoles and installation has gone up, and we're just trying to hit that budget. But there are some extra funds within the capital reserve that we may need to increase that to do that project. And that it wouldn't be significantly.
And really what happens with capital reserve, sorry, I just wanted
Go
to
ahead.
kind of comment on that. So while that project may not be, maybe a little over budget, we also have the projects that come in under budget, so it kind of balances out.
The next item there is the track sound system. On tonight's agenda, you'll see that we're asking to consider a proposal to install the track sound system. The hope would be to have that installed before spring sports. It's a budget of $20,000. You'll see that the proposal is less than that. The next item there is the schoolhouse. Most of that budget is to replace the roof. I think it was last month's report, we noted that we had, and we continue to have it professionally inspected. So we were up in the attic of the schoolhouse, checking, seeing, for any moisture and things like that. It was the recommendation of the roofing contractor that we could extend another year, that we would not need to replace yet. That's one of those things where, we want the funds there so that when it's time to do it, that we're not waiting and we need to do it. So we'll continue to inspect that roof as well as roofs all over the district.
Well, before you move on from that one, I think it would be good for the public to know that that is a historically registered building, so keeping that building up is we're required. We have to do that.
Yeah, and certainly, there are cheaper roofing systems than a cedar shake roof, but, we would be going back with a cedar shake roof on that. And I tell you what, for a building from 1895, it's holding up beautifully. It's pretty nice. So if anybody wants to go along with the attic tour, let me know. You do need to climb up. There's no stairs. You got to climb up a ladder and peek in, but it's pretty neat if you're interested in construction.
That's a no.
The next item there is athletic walkway, replace athletic walkway, repave athletic walkway. So the walkway that goes up to the tennis courts, we're looking to repave that. We've gotten some quotes there, and we want to get some additional quotes, just trying to drive down the cost. You know, as we're wrapping up this big project, that may be one that we can get done here next summer. You know, because we do have some contact with some paving companies, and we want to get a couple other contacts. So we do look to get that done. Next item there is the Friendship Library canopy poles, which are complete. And so that was under budget, so there's some extra money, extra funds there. The next item, the fencing around equipment. We are working towards that. We haven't started with that, but we are, you know, working on that. As well as the next item, domestic water requirements. We actually have started to do some things there, and we'll continue to do. They're smaller type projects, but they'll be coming out of that budget. And then the last item there is retaining wall repair, which the board will recall approved for Albany to go ahead and do that. They've been given the purchase order and things. They haven't started the work yet. That's underway, or will be underway with that. We also note the sewer line, which we talked about. And then there's safety and security projects, which probably would like to stay out of that if we can.
Thank you. So do we have any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So, moving on to item 4, new business, which I have none. And then moving to 501, adjournment of the meeting. I make a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
You
Thank
just
you.
wanted to hit the
Thank you.
gavel.
I did.